Shalom and welcome to another edition of Seekers of Meaning, the podcast TV arm of Jewish Sacred Aging. I'm your host, Rabbi Richard Address. Thank you very, very much for joining us. As we've explained a couple of times, these podcasts are aimed at talking about the impact of longevity and our own aging within the Jewish community, our family, our friends, our congregations, and our own souls. To introduce us to some very interesting and very relevant, but sometimes not talked about too much issues, we welcome to today's edition of Seekers of Meaning Lauren Litton, the Vice President of Consulting Services for Sacred Spaces. So Lauren, nice to see you. How are you doing? And if I'm not mistaken, how's Cleveland today?
Yes, Rabbi Address, first of all, nice to see you again. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this important podcast. Cleveland is cold and snowing, but, you know, I grew up here, so I've come to expect that.
So
it's nothing unusual for me.
Good for you. So you're a native Ohioan. Mm-hmm. So Sacred Spaces, this is a very, very interesting organization that deals with a variety of different issues. Walk us through the introduction to Sacred Spaces 101.
All right. And feel free to ask follow-up questions. So Sacred Spaces is a national nonprofit that partners with Jewish institutions to prevent and respond to sexual abuse and other abuses of power. And we work across the lifespan and across denominations. We really believe that healthy Jewish organizations not only reflect, but promote healthy Jewish communities. So Jewish organizations are poised to be leaders and model safety, respect, and dignity by accounting for safeguarding in their policies, practices, and daily interactions. And so we help to build their capacity to do that in several different ways. You mentioned that in Cleveland, we are a completely virtual office. So we are national, as I said. I have colleagues in Arizona, New Mexico. We keep growing. I'm trying to think. Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Arkansas, and Minnesota.
So Sacred Spaces works with Jewish organizations around the areas of sexual abuse and abuse of power. I'm a rabbi of a synagogue, and why would I call you up? Would I call you up to say because somebody's reported something in the religious school or within an interaction within a program? And if I call you up, what then would you do for my congregation?
First of all, we do partner with synagogues. We partner with all types of Jewish organizations, so day schools, seminaries, JCCs, human service agencies, federations. We do a lot of work with professional membership organizations, both nationally and state. And so organizations contact us for both prevention and response. So one of the things that you mentioned, I'll hear this all the time, like, you do such amazing work. I hope we never have to contact you. And so I like to change the narrative about that. And I can explain the different things we do, but we are looking for a future where Jewish organizations want to be inclusive, safe, and respectful places where their values are reflected in all of their operations. And that when people come to them who are part of the community, whether abuse occurred there or in the community, they know they're going to be heard, believed, and connected to resources. So I think that's a real inspirational, and that takes standardizing safeguarding. And so one of the things we do is that we create foundational resources that are grounded in research to assist organizations standardize that prevention. And I mentioned that we work across the lifespan. So we have Aleinu, which means it's on us. It is an online platform which is organized around 10 best practices that a synagogue or any youth safeguarding organization can take and implement. And starting in early 2025, it's going to be completely open access. We have Kayleen, which is a policy toolkit, which is already open access, which looks at a lens of safeguarding from discrimination, harassment, and abuse in workplaces, and upholding healthy, safe, and respectful interactions in communal spaces. And then we have SEVA, which we also call sacred aging, which is aging with dignity and autonomy. And that deals with elder abuse. And I will answer your question about the different types of services. But before we do, I've already spoken about elder abuse. And across the lifespan, we're talking about different kinds of abuses and maltreatment. And we know by the rates alone, the prevalence is high, that in your audience, there are probably people who've experienced or know people who've experienced some type of trauma and abuse. And so just want to say that this is a content warning, that we will be covering that. And it can bring up lots of different feelings. So we want people to take care of themselves and prepare for that. And I know that you are also going to be posting a list of resources with this podcast.
Right.
And so that's for people who either personally want to reach out for support, or for organizations that are looking for more information to better understand their role, or if they're concerned about somebody else.
So let's do this right away. The website, if somebody's sitting, well, let me just go on the web and Google, what are they, when they go to the Great God Google, what do they put in the thingy up bar?
So that's jewishsacredspaces.org. Now, we are not a direct service provider. We are unique in that we work from an organizational lens to support the organizations in building the infrastructures for prevention and response. So for individuals, that's why we also offered the list to be posted today.
Right. So when you say, again, let's just be clear about this. When you say we are not a direct service organization, what does that mean?
That means that if someone has experienced harm in some way, we don't do direct services with individuals. So we don't provide counseling, support, those types of services ourselves. Now, we can make referrals and recommendations, but we also know that many times people reach out to different places looking for the support they need, and that can be re-traumatizing unto itself. Right. And so I want to be really clear up front what we can and we cannot do.
So again, you work with the organization.
Yes.
So a JCC, a synagogue, a camp, a denominational structure, a seminary, who is experiencing or thinks they're experiencing something, that's where Sacred Spaces comes in and works with that organization, correct?
Yes, that's on the response side. But we also do, many organizations turn to us when nothing has happened as a proactive. Yes. So that's the prevention side of things. So we help organizations develop policies and review, right? So because we know policies help create that culture of safety and support and send clear messages about values and commitments. We do education training, and that can be for like one subset, a board who wants to better understand what a response system looks like, or it could be comprehensive that a community says we want to roll out a whole initiative on whether it is youth safeguarding or safeguarding across the lifespan, and we meet with community and staff and different organizational leaders. Organization brings us in as like a thought partner, so we might serve as an advisor or a coach to leadership task force that are taking on these initiatives or leading culture change or creating that infrastructure. We are asked to do assessments where organizations want to know, how are we doing in these areas? Are we really creating that sense of belonging, safety, and respect? And we use lots of different tools and methodologies to hear from stakeholders and then provide recommendations of some next steps. And then the thing that you mentioned is something we also do, which is called case consultations. And that is when an organization is concerned about something or actual misconduct has come to their attention, and it could have been that morning or 30 years ago. We meet with them as a team, and we have a team of experts on our side that help them respond in an ethical manner. And that can look like so many different ways. We can be providing education about the issues so that there's better understanding. Some organizations, a lot of times we get calls from organizations, nothing's actually happened at the organization, but it might involve somebody in the community, and there's a question even about access and safety to the organization, like the shul, the synagogue you're talking about. This happened outside. What are our considerations to make sure that access is safe, or, we need to limit it in some way? Do we need to make a report to a governmental agency? And we really look at this by approaching it for support for everybody involved. And then I think the last thing that a lot of organizations ask us for is help with communications. There needs to be a communication to a community. We look at it through a trauma-informed lens to make sure that not only is it factual, but it's not shaming, it's empathetic, it doesn't perpetrate like any myths or excuses for abuse, it preserves anonymity and upholds autonomy of victim survivors. And we also always, have an organization include those resources as well for people to reach out.
So I would imagine, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, that the people scattered around the country, when they go into work with an organization, say, they have to become familiar with the laws of the state in which they're operating, correct?
Many of us who work here are lawyers or hold other types of degrees, but we're not sitting in that relationship with the organizations. And so we're really using research, evidence-based practices, and extensive knowledge and experience to help guide. But we always tell an organization that they need to check whether it's implementing a policy or making an HR decision with a lawyer to make sure that they're in compliance.
How often do you have to, as a result of an evaluation or consultation, pick up the phone and, so to speak, and call the local police?
So one of the things, especially in case consultations, but this is all of our services, we really pride ourselves in building relationships and making sure that there's confidentiality and privacy, but we have exceptions. And upfront, we tell the organizations, and this is actually something we teach individuals when we teach people how to receive a response, a disclosure. Let's say when we start talking about elder abuse, if you are a mandated reporter, you need to tell somebody up front so they can decide what to tell you. So we have mandated ourselves, reporters of reasonable suspicion of child abuse or abuse of a vulnerable adult. So in a situation that we receive information where we believe a report needs to be made, we will support and guide the organization in doing that. We've been on phone calls with an organization. We've provided questions. We've supported them through the process. But ultimately, if they don't make it, the report, we will make the report. Since I will be here 5 years, I've done that once.
Yeah. That's very frightening. We're talking with Lauren Litton, the Vice President of Consulting Services for Sacred Spaces. We're going to be right back with Lauren. I want to ask you a little bit about the value ethics statement component of when you go and work with an organization, and we'll do that right after this message. Thank you, and welcome back to today's edition of Secrets of Meaning, the podcast arm of Jewish Sacred Aging. And again, we're speaking with Lauren Litton, the Vice President of Consulting Services for Sacred Spaces. And you talk about in the guiding principles, ethical principles. Jewish ethics are filled with guiding principles. Where is this juxtaposition when you work with an organization with the Jewish component, the Jewish values component? How do you include that, or is it not done frontally, but sort of like by osmosis, or does it vary from situation to situation?
It varies from situation to situation, but almost all Jewish organizations are guided by their own set of values, and that is the first place that we start with, as is understanding what is important to that organization and how they want to be reflected in the world. And so that's the basis for everything we do. An example, maybe we can turn to like even how we got to Seva and how we've interwoven this. So taking a step back first, as I said, we've always worked across the lifespan, but it was really when at the start of the pandemic, we recognized the immediate need to provide resources on the mitigation of elder abuse, because understanding that the strategies required to keep us all safe, from a medical perspective, were also significant risk factors for maltreatment of older adults. And so we wrote and disseminated 3 resources. One was for communal Jewish organizations. One was for Jewish institutions like long-term care facilities and nursing homes. And the other was for family members and caregivers. Those are posted, and you can see how they're grounded in Jewish text and values. We were so grateful that the Sephardic Foundation on Aging actually saw these resources and approached us and decided to invest in us building a much more robust program. So when this was started about 2 years ago, we really wanted to be guided by the experiences and insights of individuals most involved in impact. So we started holding listening sessions with professionals in Jewish organizations and older Jewish adults. And we started examining, so to your point, like, how are we fulfilling and falling short on mitnei seva takum v'dar b'nei zakein, rising and showing deference to the old. It was very important to us to use these texts to hear from people about their experiences. And we also disseminated a survey to professionals working at Jewish human service agencies. And I can talk about the themes that emerged and where we've gone from there, but I want to make sure I'm responding to your questions.
The elder abuse, it's still such a hidden reality. We don't do that, but the reality is, as you know, and as colleagues who counsel these families, we know that it does. And so talk to me about like how the parameters of what that, because elder abuse is a very large term now, and it can go anywhere from physical abuse to financial abuse. There's a commentary on, I think, Masechet Kedushin that about how you can use money as a manipulative tool to control another human being, which can happen very easily within family, as you know, within family systems. So how does Sacred Spaces, Seva, walk into that?
Yeah. So I think the first thing I'll say is, for anyone listening, I want them to know some basic things. Is what it is common, like you're saying, that no community is immune, including the Jewish community. It occurs in all settings, in people's homes, in the community, and institutional settings. And while some people can be more vulnerable to abuse, it can happen to anyone. And most importantly, it can be prevented. And that is such a role for Jewish, especially communal organizations. So we held these listening sessions. We talked to lots of people, and these 3 themes emerged: the need for connection, support, and knowledge. And just like what you said, is that people said there is hesitation to talk openly about elder abuse in Jewish community. What people will talk about those externally perpetrated financial, scams, but there's no talk about if it's intimate partner violence, abuse from family members or trusted caregivers. And that overall, there was just even too few dedicated efforts to helping older adults age with dignity and autonomy. So we heard that people were just experiencing lots of loneliness and isolation, which is one of the greatest risk factors, right, to elder abuse. And for people who had actually experienced abuse and neglect in the Jewish community, older adults said there was so much shame and they had nowhere to turn. And professionals alike were saying that they felt isolated, that, they might be the only person in the Jewish community that had been tasked to address this. And that there was no formal community coordinated response. So, and Rabbi said we need more education, tools, resources. So even our name, Seba, came from listening to people who said, we like autonomy and dignity and the crown of glory of gray hair. As you said, elder abuse is really an umbrella term. Correct. And it includes physical, emotional, psychological, financial abuse and exploitation and neglect. And the legal terms differ from state to state, but I think there's some core components that it's an intentional or it's a failure to act by a trusted individual that causes harm or loss to an individual, an older adult. The age of the individuals also vary across. Age 60 now is accepted as for elder abuse. So we have people living from 60 to 100. So that's a lot of diversity within that age. Yeah.
Before we start running out of time, I want to just pick up on a couple of things as well. So going back to what you first started with about, sacred spaces, the idea of sexual abuse.
Mm-hmm.
How much have you been involved with teenagers and that type of stuff? And it's not, we'll put the elder abuse here you just talked about, but this is in institutions and it's not limited to any one generation.
Correct.
Are you finding more concern about younger people and instances of younger people regarding sexual abuse that you're getting called in for?
Versus with older people?
Yeah,
I think it's interesting. So people, I think, are more appalled and about sexual abuse when it comes to youth, right? We've got to do the protection. I think there's still a lot of lack of awareness about the extent with older adults. And it's also a different situation because what we're talking about, and I can go over some prevalence here because so that people can really understand if that would be helpful of the amount of abuse we're talking about. So the World Health Organization said globally 1 in 6 people age 60 or older have experienced some form of abuse. And because most people live in their home or in their community, most abuse occurs there. 60% of all cases are committed by family members, 2/3 of whom are adult children or spouses or partners. For every case reported, it is believed that 23 are not. I think you had a program already on this, but last year alone in the United States, 5 million older adults experienced financial exploitation with a loss of over $36 billion. And then it's happening in long-term care and nursing homes as well. A study showed that 2 out of 3 staff members in a nursing home believe that they committed abuse or neglect within the last year. And those residents are also experiencing abuse from other residents and visitors and family members. There's no data exactly for the Jewish community, but it's generally accepted that it's a similar statistic to general population.
Have you been involved, because the other thing that you mentioned at the beginning, the abuse of power thing,
Mm-hmm.
and then this is all interrelated. I mean, abuse is abuse of power, et cetera, et cetera. But have you as an organization been called on to do any seminars or teaching in seminaries, in rabbinic seminaries?
Yes.
Talk to me about that, because go ahead. I'll shut up.
No, please don't.
No. It's just,
Yes, we have. And I think we would love to see that even grow, because as you may know, it's not only just being aware of these issues, right, that you're serving in your community, getting to know, but it's also people are forming very close relationships with rabbis, and there's also different expectations, right, and boundaries can get murky and crossed. So it's understanding personal boundaries, professional boundaries. We hear from rabbis about the relationships that are created even through like pastoral counseling, right? Understanding how those can easily become like that power you're talking about, or into a coercive, abusive relationship, whether it may not have been intended, but there's a lot of power and control just in the relationship itself, right? And there's nothing you can do about that. There's always going to be, people are going to look at the rabbi, and it's given. The deference is given. So it's really important to teach all professionals, but especially ones before I came to Sacred Spaces, and before my consulting, I actually worked at a national judicial organization. And so it was the same type of power that we give to judges, about understanding their power, how to use it in a positive, healthy way, right? We're not talking about getting rid of power, but understanding how, when it isn't.
yeah, I mean, the idea of trying to teach rabbinic students, cantorial students, Jewish educators who walk out into a position of respect and in a certain sense, power, what that means.
Mm-hmm.
And the challenge, of course, is if you get that class and you're 27 years old, it really may not resonate until you're out a couple of years and you walk into something where somebody accuses you of, not treating them well. And I mean, it's so, and especially in this society of cancel culture and this, that, and I would imagine that it is so complex and nuanced, maybe that's the best word, nuanced.
Yes.
That when Sacred Spaces gets called into a situation, I would imagine that the homework and the peeling back of the various layers of the onion can be overwhelming sometimes.
I've been in this work for like 30 years. So I don't know if it's overwhelming. I think taking that first step for people to make that call and going into the unknown. But it's so rewarding to see our Jewish leaders willing to go through that nuance and complexity for their own understanding, but also for their community. And I'll tell you, we get calls all the time from rabbis who maybe had that class in their seminary, like 5 years later saying, I have a situation I just want to run by. I have this gut feeling. We welcome that, right? Tell me what I'm seeing. Is this right? Or I'm concerned about this. Or how can I even structure the way that I meet with congregants in a different way so that I'm reflecting the safeguarding that, that I know is important. And so it doesn't have to be scary, but that nuance is really important as well, because one of the things is that we want to support everybody involved. First and foremost, of course, the people who've experienced harm. But we also have to think about support for even the person who may have caused harm too, right? Because we want to leave our community a safer place. And so how are we doing that?
So, Lauren, I hope that the ethics committee of all the movements give you a call, because they could really use this conversation in a safe and confidential. Having once served many, many, many years ago in the ethics committee of our movement, and things have only gotten much more complex. So we have been speaking with Lauren Litton, the Vice President of Consulting Services for Sacred Spaces. Again, before we leave, Lauren, again, thank you very, very much. There's so much here that you are working in. To contact you, the website is
jewishsacredspaces.org.
And we will be posting, our producer Steve has that list of resources. And I think we're going to link it here so you can sort of like one-stop shop it. Thank you very much for your time. Continued success. Take care of Cleveland. And just stay healthy. And thank you for what you're doing, because it's really, really, really important work. So thank you, Lauren, very much.
Thank you, and hope to see you soon.
To all of you, thank you very, very much for joining us on today's edition of Secrets of Meaning, the podcast TV arm of Jewish Sacred Aging. If you'd like to make a comment, please email me, Rabbi Address at jewishsacredaging.com, or you can go to the website, jewishsacredaging.com. And if you'd like to help us support our work, there's a conveniently located donate button. Just click on that, follow the prompts. It's real easy. If you'd like to consider being a sponsor to one or more of our programs, please again, just email me. We'll take it from there. Secrets of Meaning is produced at the Broadcast Center of Lubetkin Media in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. And a huge shout out to our producer, Steve Lubetkin, the tech genius of South Jersey or more. To all of you, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate your time and your interest in our programming and our subject matter. Until we see each other again, stay safe, stay healthy, be kind to one another.